Please, I'm pregnant.
I'm an ICE agent. I will make sure you are deported.
The fluorescent lights of Memorial Hermann Hospital flickered overhead as Daniel Hargreaves paced the emergency room corridor, his hands trembling. Behind the doors, his wife Emily was screaming, and the medical team was shouting in rapid-fire Spanish. He couldn't understand a word. The doctor turned to him, eyes urgent, and said something that sounded like life or death, but Daniel stood there, helpless, stripped of every ounce of authority he'd ever possessed. "We need an interpreter," the nurse called out. Now. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. And then the door opened, and she walked in. The woman from 12 days ago. The pregnant black woman he had humiliated on a Houston street corner in front of dozens of witnesses. The woman whose dignity he had trampled because he could, because his badge gave him permission, because he never imagined consequences. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Daniel Hargreaves understood what real power looked like. But let's go back. Back to where this all started. Back to the moment Daniel made the biggest mistake of his career. It was a Tuesday morning in Houston, the kind where humidity clings to your skin before you've even stepped outside. Daniel Hargreaves sat in his government-issued SUV, scrolling through his phone, bored. He'd been with ICE for 6 years, and lately, the job had become routine. Stop. Question. Process. Move on. He barely saw the people anymore. Just cases. Just numbers. Just problems to be solved or sent away. His partner Rodriguez had called in sick that morning, which meant Daniel was flying solo. He preferred it that way sometimes. No one to question his methods. No one to tell him to ease up. He was good at his job. Efficient. Respected, or at least feared, which in his mind was better than respect. The radio crackled with routine chatter. Daniel was about to head back to the office when he saw her. A black woman, heavily pregnant, walking down the sidewalk near a small grocery store in the 5th Ward. She carried 2 shopping bags, moving slowly, one hand on her lower back. Something about her triggered his instincts. Maybe it was the neighborhood. Maybe it was profiling. Maybe it was just Tuesday, and he needed to justify his paycheck. He pulled the SUV to the curb and stepped out, adjusting his vest. The ICE logo caught the morning sun. People on the street noticed immediately. Some turned away. Others pulled out their phones. Daniel was used to it. Let them record. He had the law on his side. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice carrying that particular tone of authority that came naturally after years of practice. "I need to speak with you." Naomi Carter stopped walking. She turned slowly, carefully, her hands still supporting her back. She was in her 3rd trimester, 34 weeks along, and everything hurt. Her feet were swollen, her back ached, and all she wanted was to get home, put away the groceries, and rest before her shift at the hospital that evening. She worked as a certified medical interpreter, fluent in Spanish, French, and Haitian Creole. She'd helped save lives with her words. Today, she just wanted peace. "Yes, officer," she said quietly, setting down her bags. "Agent." Daniel corrected, moving closer. "ICE. I need to see your identification." Naomi felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her face calm. She'd lived in Houston for 12 years, ever since marrying Marcus, a chemical engineer at one of the refineries. She was a U.S. citizen, had been since childhood. Her parents had immigrated from Jamaica legally, worked 2 jobs each, sent her to college. She had nothing to hide, but she also knew how these situations could escalate. "Of course," she said, reaching slowly for her purse. "My wallet is right here." "Slowly," Daniel said, his hand moving instinctively toward his belt. He knew she was pregnant and clearly not a threat, but the gesture was automatic. Dominance through implication. A small crowd had begun to gather. 2 older women from the grocery store. A man in a delivery truck. A teenager on a bicycle. Phones were coming out. Daniel noticed but didn't care. He'd been recorded before. Nothing ever came of it. Naomi handed him her driver's license, her movements measured and deliberate. Daniel examined it, taking his time. Texas license. Houston address. Her photo showed a woman with kind eyes and natural hair pulled back in a bun. The license was legitimate. He could see that immediately. But something in him resisted letting her go so easily. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the audience. Maybe it was something darker that he'd never examined in himself. "This you?" he asked, holding up the license and comparing it to her face, as if the resemblance wasn't obvious. "Yes, sir," Naomi replied, her voice steady. "That's me. You live at this address?" "Yes, sir." "Alone?" "No, sir. With my husband and my daughter." Daniel's jaw tightened. "What's your husband's name?" Naomi felt anger flicker in her chest, but she kept it buried. "Marcus Carter. He's an engineer." "Would you like his phone number?" "I'll ask the questions," Daniel snapped. He circled her slowly, and Naomi felt the weight of his gaze, the performance of his authority. He was doing this for the crowd now, she realized. Proving something. "Where were you born?" "Kingston, Jamaica." "I've been a U.S. citizen since I was 8 years old." "Sure you have." Daniel's tone dripped with skepticism. "Let me guess, you just happened to have all your paperwork in order when you came here." "My parents came here legally," Naomi said, her voice firmer now. "They worked for years to bring our family here the right way. I went to school here. I work here. I pay taxes here. I belong here. Everyone's got a story," Daniel said, handing back her license with exaggerated slowness. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough that only she could hear the next part. "You know what I think? I think you people always have something to hide. You come here, have your babies on our soil, think that makes you American. Let me tell you something, sweetheart. That baby you're carrying doesn't make you special, doesn't make you untouchable." Naomi's breath caught. Not from fear, but from the sheer audacity of his cruelty. She'd experienced racism before, subtle and overt, but something about this moment, about being pregnant and vulnerable, and still being treated as less than human, cut deeper than she expected. "You have my identification," she said quietly. "Everything is in order. Am I free to go?" Daniel straightened up, making a show of considering her request. The crowd had grown larger now. Someone was definitely live streaming. He could see the phone held high, the red recording dot visible. Let them watch. Let them see federal authority in action. "Tell you what," Daniel said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear now. "I'm gonna let you go. This time. But you be careful out here. Woman in your condition, anything could happen. You wouldn't want to have that baby in detention, would you? They've got facilities for that, you know. Not pretty, but they get the job done." The crowd murmured. One of the older women said something sharp in Spanish, but Daniel ignored her. Naomi picked up her grocery bags, her hands shaking slightly now, though not from fear. From rage. From the injustice of being humiliated while pregnant, while tired, while doing nothing wrong except existing in her own neighborhood. But she'd learned long ago that showing anger in these situations only made things worse. So she channeled it inward, compressed it, stored it somewhere deep. She looked Daniel Hargreaves directly in the eyes and said, "You don't know who you're talking to, officer, but you will." Daniel laughed, a short dismissive bark. "That a threat?" "No," Naomi said, already turning to walk away. "It's just the truth. Life has a way of teaching lessons. You'll learn yours." She walked away slowly, her back straight despite the pain, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her hurry or cower. Behind her, she could hear Daniel making some joke to the crowd, something about illegals getting bold these days. A few people laughed nervously. Most didn't. Naomi made it 3 blocks before she had to stop and lean against a wall, her breath coming in short gasps, tears she'd refused to shed in front of him now streaming down her face. She called Marcus, her voice breaking as she told him what happened. He was furious, wanted to file a complaint immediately, wanted to call their lawyer, wanted to make that agent pay, but Naomi said no. She dealt with men like Daniel before. Complaints disappeared. Lawyers were expensive. The system protected its own. She had a baby coming, a job she loved, a community that needed her skills. She wouldn't let one racist agent derail her life. Let it go, she told Marcus that night as they lay in bed,
his hand on her belly feeling their sun kick. God will handle him. The universe has a way of balancing things out. Marcus wasn't convinced, but he respected his wife's decision. Naomi Carter had always been the stronger one, the one who could endure storms and still stand afterward. He'd learned to trust her instincts. Meanwhile, across town, Daniel Hargreaves sat in his recliner, beer in hand, recounting the day's events to his wife, Emily. She was also pregnant about 5 months along, and lately, she'd been having complications. Bleeding. Cramping? The doctor said to watch for warning signs, but Daniel kept dismissing her concerns. Pregnancy is always uncomfortable, he'd say. You're fine. Women have been having babies for thousands of years. That night, as he told her about the encounter with Naomi, embellishing details, making himself sound more heroic and her more suspicious, Emily barely listened. She felt another cramp, sharper this time, and placed a hand on her stomach. Something didn't feel right, but Daniel was too busy laughing at his own jokes to notice. You should have seen her face when I mentioned detention facilities, Daniel said, laughing. These people think they're untouchable just because they've been here a few years. They need reminders about who's really in charge. Emily nodded absently, her mind on the growing discomfort in her abdomen. She'd call the doctor tomorrow, she decided, just to be safe. The next day at the Icefield office, Daniel recounted the story again to his colleagues. Some laughed. Some said nothing. Rodriguez, his usual partner who'd returned from sick leave, just shook his head. Man, why do you do that? Rodriguez asked. She had valid ID. You could have just let her go, because they need to know. Daniel said, his voice taking on that edge of righteousness he always got when challenged. They need to understand this is our country, and they're here on borrowed time. You get soft, and they take advantage. Rodriguez had worked with Daniel for 3 years and knew better than to argue. Daniel had a reputation in the office, aggressive but effective. He made his numbers. Management liked results, and Daniel delivered. But Rodriguez had also seen the complaints, watched them get buried, heard the whispers from community leaders about the agent who went too far. He wondered sometimes how long Daniel's luck would hold. 10 days passed. For Naomi, life continued. She went to work at Memorial Hermann Hospital, translating for Spanish-speaking patients and their families. She was beloved by the staff, known for her patience, her accuracy, her ability to stay calm even in chaotic emergency situations. More than once, doctors had told her she'd saved lives simply by making sure nothing was lost in translation during critical moments. Her pregnancy progressed normally, regular checkups, strong heartbeat, baby boy positioned perfectly. She and Marcus had picked out a name, Jordan Michael Carter. They'd set up the nursery in soft blues and greens. Their 4-year-old daughter, Aria, was excited to become a big sister. Life was good, despite that ugly encounter that Naomi tried not to think about. For Daniel, those same 10 days were routine. More stops, more questioning, more assertions of authority. Emily's condition worsened slightly, more bleeding, more pain, but she downplayed it, and Daniel didn't push. He was busy. Work was demanding. The baby would be fine. Emily was strong. She worried too much, he told her. On the 11th night, Emily woke at 2 a.m. to severe cramping. Not normal pregnancy discomfort. Something sharper, something wrong. She tried to wake Daniel, but he was deep asleep, exhausted from a long shift. She went to the bathroom and saw blood. Too much blood. Daniel, she screamed. He jolted awake, stumbling into the bathroom where Emily sat on the floor, pale and shaking. Even in his half-asleep state, Daniel knew this was serious. Hospital, she gasped. Now. He didn't bother with clothes, just threw a jacket over his t-shirt and helped her to the car. His hands shook as he drove, running red lights, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. This couldn't be happening. Not to him. Not now. They'd waited so long for this baby. Emily had miscarried twice before. This pregnancy was supposed to be the one that worked. He screeched into the emergency bay at Memorial Hermann at 2:30 in the morning, left the car running with the door open, and half-carried Emily through the automatic doors. Help! He shouted. My wife. She's bleeding. She's pregnant, please. Nurses rushed forward with a wheelchair. Within seconds, Emily was surrounded by medical staff, being wheeled toward an examination room. Daniel tried to follow, but a nurse stopped him. Sir, you need to register her first. Insurance information, medical history. She's dying, Daniel shouted. Do your job. The nurse, a young woman named Patricia, who dealt with panicked family members countless times, remained calm. Sir, we are helping her. But I need information. What's her name? Daniel gave the details in fragments, his mind barely processing the questions. Yes, she was pregnant. 22 weeks. Yes, she'd had complications before. No, he didn't know her blood type. Why didn't he know her blood type? Behind the doors of the examination room, the medical team worked quickly. Emily's OB-GYN, Dr. Vasquez, arrived within 15 minutes, still in his pajamas under his white coat. He examined Emily, and immediately his face grew serious. Placental abruption, he said to the attending nurse. Possibly complete. We need an ultrasound now and prep for emergency surgery. She might deliver tonight. The nurse's eyes widened. 22 weeks was extremely premature. The baby's chances of survival were low. But if the placenta had completely separated from the uterine wall, both mother and baby were in danger. Dr. Vasquez began explaining the situation to Emily, but she was in too much pain to fully comprehend. He spoke quickly in medical terminology, mixing English with his native Spanish in his urgency. The anesthesiologist arrived and also began speaking rapidly, explaining procedures, risks, options. Emily tried to understand, but pain and fear clouded her mind. I need my husband, she gasped. Where's Daniel? They brought Daniel in, and Dr. Vasquez began explaining again, this time more slowly. But in his stress and urgency, Dr. Vasquez kept slipping into Spanish, the language he was most comfortable with in high-pressure situations. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Ramirez, did the same. They were coordinating, discussing options, debating whether to attempt to stabilize and delay delivery or move to emergency C-section immediately. Daniel understood perhaps half of what they were saying. Maybe less. Medical terminology he didn't know, Spanish words he couldn't translate, the situation moving so fast his mind couldn't keep up. Wait, what are you saying? Daniel interrupted. Speak English. What's happening to my wife? Dr. Vasquez took a breath, tried to slow down. Mr. Hargreaves, your wife has a condition called placental abruption. The placenta is separating from the uterine wall. This is very serious. We may need to deliver the baby tonight to save your wife's life, but it's too early. Daniel said, his voice breaking. The baby won't survive. We'll do everything we can, Dr. Vasquez said. But right now, your wife is my priority. If we don't act quickly, she could bleed out. Do you understand? Daniel nodded, but he didn't understand. Not really. Everything was moving too fast. Emily was crying, begging him to save their baby. The medical team was pulling her towards surgery. Dr. Ramirez was explaining anesthesia options, something about epidural versus general, risks and benefits, and half of it was in Spanish, and Daniel wanted to scream. I need someone who speaks English. Daniel shouted. I can't understand what you're saying. Sir, we are speaking English. Patricia, the nurse, said firmly. But the doctors are explaining complex medical situations. Please try to stay calm. Get me someone else. Daniel demanded. Someone who can explain this properly. My wife is dying, and you're speaking Spanish to each other like I'm not even here. Patricia exchanged a glance with Dr. Vasquez. This wasn't the time to debate language accessibility. They needed to move fast. But the husband was clearly not comprehending the situation, and they needed informed consent for the surgery. Get an interpreter, Dr. Vasquez said quietly to Patricia. Medical Spanish to English. We need to make sure he understands completely before we proceed. Patricia nodded and stepped out, paging the on-call interpreter service. At 2:45 in the morning, options were limited, but Memorial Hermann kept a list of certified interpreters who could come in for emergencies. She paged Naomi Carter. Naomi's phone buzzed on her nightstand, pulling her from sleep. She checked the screen. Hospital. Emergency interpreter needed. She sighed, kissed Marcus on the forehead, and started getting dressed. This happened occasionally. Medical emergencies didn't respect sleep schedules. She was tired, heavily pregnant, but this was her job. People needed her. She arrived at the hospital 20 minutes later, wearing comfortable scrubs she kept in her car for these situations. Patricia met her at the nurse's station and quickly explained the situation. Pregnant woman, placental abruption, possible emergency C-section. Husband is panicking and having trouble understanding the medical explanations. Doctors need clear consent before proceeding. Naomi nodded. Standard high-stress situation. She'd handled dozens of these. She followed Patricia toward the examination room, reviewing medical terminology in her head, preparing to be the calm voice in the storm. Patricia opened the door. Doctor, the interpreter is here. Naomi stepped into the room and froze. Daniel Hargreaves stood next to the examination table where his wife lay crying. He was facing away from the door, his attention on Emily, but when he heard someone enter, he turned. Their eyes met. Recognition hit them both simultaneously. Daniel's face went pale. Naomi's hand instinctively went to her own pregnant belly, a protective gesture. For 3 seconds, neither of them spoke. The room, despite being full of people and machines in urgent medical situations, fell silent. Dr. Vasquez looked between them, confused. "Do you two know each other?" he asked. Naomi recovered first. She was a professional. Whatever had happened between them 12 days ago existed in a different world. Right now, a woman's life was at stake. Possibly 2 lives. "No," Naomi said clearly, her voice steady. "Where do you need me?" Daniel's mouth opened, then closed.
He wanted to say something. Wanted to apologize maybe, or explain, or beg her not to hold a grudge. But no words came out. He just stood there, stripped of all authority, wearing pajama pants and a jacket, his hair messy, his eyes red from fear and exhaustion. Naomi turned to Dr. Vasquez. "What do you need translated?" Dr. Vasquez began explaining the medical situation, speaking in rapid Spanish to ensure accuracy, trusting Naomi to convey every detail correctly to Daniel. Naomi listened carefully, her face neutral, her mind processing the technical information with practiced ease. Then she turned to Daniel and began translating. "Dr. Vasquez says your wife has experienced a placental abruption. This means the placenta, which provides oxygen and nutrients to the baby, has begun to separate from the uterine wall. This is a medical emergency. Your wife is bleeding internally, and if they don't act quickly, she could go into shock or cardiac arrest." Daniel listened, hearing the words clearly for the first time, understanding cutting through his panic. Naomi continued, her voice calm and professional. "The baby is 22 weeks old, which is below the viability threshold. If they deliver now, the baby's chances of survival are less than 10%. However, if they don't deliver soon, your wife will die. The doctor needs your consent to proceed with emergency surgery. He will attempt to save both your wife and the baby, but his priority is your wife's life. Do you understand?" Daniel's legs felt weak. He gripped the edge of Emily's bed. "Save my wife," he whispered. "Do whatever you have to do. Just save Emily." Naomi translated his consent back to Dr. Vasquez, who nodded and immediately began issuing orders to the nursing staff. They had minutes, not hours. As the team prepared to move Emily to the operating room, Daniel suddenly grabbed Naomi's arm. She stiffened but didn't pull away. "Please," Daniel said, his voice cracking. "Please help her. I know what I did. I know what I said to you. But please, don't let my wife die because of my mistakes. Please." Naomi looked at him, really looked at him. She saw a terrified man, stripped of his arrogance, facing the possible loss of everything he loved. She could have said so many things. Could have reminded him of his cruelty, his words about detention facilities, his casual dismissal of her humanity. She could have walked away and let another interpreter handle this. She would have been justified. Instead, she gently removed his hand from her arm and said, "I'm not here as the woman you humiliated 12 days ago. I'm here as a professional. Your wife will get the best care, the best communication, the best chance of survival. That's what I do. I help people, regardless of who they are or what they've done. Now let the doctors work." If you're watching this story and you can relate to the power of dignity over revenge, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about justice. They wheeled Emily toward surgery. Daniel followed as far as he was allowed, then was directed to the surgical waiting room. Naomi stayed with the medical team, continuing to provide interpretation as needed. Dr. Vasquez worked with intense focus, and Naomi translated his instructions to the surgical nurses with precision. Inside the operating room, the team worked against time. Dr. Vasquez made the incision, moving quickly but carefully. The placenta had indeed separated almost completely. Blood filled the uterine cavity. They delivered the tiny baby boy within minutes, barely the size of Dr. Vasquez's hand. The neonatal team took over immediately, rushing the infant to the NICU. Naomi watched from her position near the head of the operating table, translating Dr. Ramirez's updates about Emily's vitals. The baby was alive, but critical. Emily was bleeding heavily, but Dr. Vasquez was controlling it. The next hour would determine if either of them survived. In the waiting room, Daniel sat with his head in his hands. Another man sat across from him, also waiting, also terrified. They didn't speak. What was there to say? Both of them existed in that horrible purgatory between hope and despair. An hour later, Dr. Vasquez emerged, still in his surgical scrubs, pulling down his mask. Daniel jumped to his feet. "Your wife is stable," Dr. Vasquez said. "We stopped the bleeding. She's in recovery now. She lost a lot of blood and will need transfusions, but she's going to survive." Daniel felt his knees buckle. "The baby?" Dr. Vasquez's expression grew somber. "Your son is alive, but he's extremely premature. He weighs just over 1 pound. The next 72 hours are critical. I won't lie to you, Mr. Hargreaves. His chances are not good. But he's fighting. He's on a ventilator, and the NICU team is doing everything possible." Daniel nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Vasquez placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your wife will be able to see him in a few hours, once she's stable enough to be moved. You can see her now if you'd like." They led Daniel to the recovery room where Emily lay, pale and weak, but breathing. He took her hand and wept. She was too exhausted to speak much, but she squeezed his hand, and that was enough. Later, when Emily had been moved to a regular room and was sleeping, Daniel went looking for Naomi. He found her in the hallway, updating paperwork on her interpretation session. She saw him approaching and straightened, her professional mask back in place. "I want to apologize," Daniel started, his voice hoarse from crying. "For what I did. For what I said. For how I treated you. It was wrong. It was cruel. You didn't deserve that. No one deserves that." Naomi looked at him for a long moment. "You're right. I didn't deserve it. And I wasn't the first person you've treated that way, and I probably won't be the last. Because apologies are easy when you need something. When you're scared. When you're on the other side of power. But that woman you humiliated 12 days ago, she'll always remember. She'll remember being pregnant and tired and doing nothing wrong, and being made to feel less than human because you had a badge and a bad day." Daniel flinched as if struck. "I know. And I can't take it back. I wish I could, but I can't." "No, you can't," Naomi agreed. "But maybe you can learn from it. Maybe you can look at the next person you stop, the next family you question, and remember this moment. Remember what it feels like to be powerless, to need help from someone you've wronged, to have your life in the hands of someone you treated as less than." "I will," Daniel said. "I promise I will." Naomi studied him, trying to gauge sincerity. She'd heard promises before from people in crisis, meant in the moment, forgotten later. But there was something in Daniel's eyes, a brokenness that suggested maybe this lesson had finally penetrated. "Your wife and son need you to be better," Naomi said, "not just for them, but for all the families you'll encounter in your work. Because the badge doesn't make you better than anyone else. It just gives you responsibility. Use it better." She turned to leave, then paused. "I hope your son survives, Agent Hargreaves. I genuinely do. No child deserves to suffer for their parents' mistakes." Over the next 2 weeks,
Emily recovered slowly but steadily. Their son, whom they named Michael, fought for his life in the NICU. Daniel took leave from work, spending 18 hours a day at the hospital, watching his tiny son through the incubator glass, praying to a God he hadn't spoken to in years. Naomi finished out her pregnancy, working until her water broke naturally at 38 weeks. She delivered a healthy baby boy, Jordan, with Marcus and Aria by her side. She spent 3 days in the hospital, in a room 2 floors below the NICU, where Michael Hargreaves continued his precarious existence. Daniel saw her in the hallway once, being wheeled to discharge with her new baby in her arms, her husband and daughter walking alongside, all of them glowing with joy. He watched from a distance, not approaching, just observing what healthy, normal, deserved happiness looked like. His son might never leave the hospital. Michael had already survived 3 surgeries, 2 infections, and countless crisis moments. The doctors said his odds of survival had increased to 50%. 50-50. A coin flip. 3 days after Naomi went home, Daniel received a call at the hospital from his supervisor at ICE. There had been complaints. Multiple complaints, actually. From community members, from that incident 12 days before his son was born. Witnesses had come forward. Video had surfaced. Internal Affairs wanted to speak with him. Daniel felt a cold pit form in his stomach. Who filed the complaint? He asked. Multiple sources, his supervisor said carefully. Community advocates. The woman from the video filed nothing directly, but others did on her behalf. There's also been some discussion about your patterns of behavior, other incidents. We need to have a conversation when you're back. Daniel hung up and sat in the NICU family waiting room, staring at nothing. He wasn't surprised. Somewhere deep down, he'd known this was coming. You couldn't treat people the way he had and expect no consequences forever. The universe, as Naomi had said, had a way of teaching lessons, but the timing felt intentional, didn't it? Like life itself was making a point. You think you're untouchable? Watch this. You think power protects you? Think again. That evening, as he sat beside Michael's incubator, watching his son's tiny chest rise and fall with the help of machines, Daniel made a decision. When he returned to work, if he returned to work, he would be different. Not because he'd been caught, not because there would be consequences, but because his son deserved a better father, because Emily deserved a better husband, because every person he encountered in his job deserved to be treated with basic human dignity. He didn't know if it was too late, if the complaints would end his career, if Michael would survive, if Emily would ever trust him again after seeing who he really was in that moment of crisis. But he knew he couldn't go back to being the man he'd been. That version of Daniel Hargreaves had died in a hospital corridor when he'd looked into the eyes of a woman he'd wronged and seen not revenge, but professionalism. Not cruelty, but mercy. Michael survived. Against all odds, against every statistic, he survived. After 93 days in the NICU, he came home weighing just under 5 pounds. He would have health challenges, developmental delays, but he was alive. Daniel considered it nothing short of a miracle. The investigation at ICE concluded 6 weeks after it began. Daniel received a formal reprimand, was mandated to complete sensitivity training, and was placed on probation for 1 year. He kept his job, but barely. His supervisor made it clear that one more incident, one more complaint, and he was done. Daniel accepted the consequences without argument. He attended every training session. He listened, really listened, for the first time in years. He learned about implicit bias, about the trauma of aggressive questioning, about the humanity of every person he encountered in his work. He changed his approach. Stopped profiling. Stopped assuming. Started seeing people first, cases second. Some of his colleagues mocked him, said he'd gone soft. Rodriguez, his partner, just smiled and said, "About time, man, about time." 4 months after Michael came home from the hospital, Daniel saw Naomi again. She was at the grocery store, pushing a cart with baby Jordan strapped to her chest in a carrier, and her daughter Aria dancing alongside. She looked radiant, happy, completely recovered from pregnancy and childbirth. Daniel almost turned away, not wanting to intrude on her peace. But something made him approach. Maybe the need for closure. Maybe the desire to show her he'd changed. Maybe just basic human decency, which he was slowly relearning. "Mrs. Carter," he said quietly, keeping his distance. Naomi turned, recognized him, and her expression became cautious, but not hostile. "Agent Hargreaves, I wanted to thank you," Daniel said. "For that night. You could have refused to help. No one would have blamed you. But you stayed, and you did your job perfectly, and my wife is alive because you did. So thank you." Naomi adjusted Jordan in his carrier, considering her response. "How is your son?" "He's home. He's got a long road ahead, but he's fighting. He's strong." Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "I named him Michael. It means gift from God." Naomi nodded. "That's a good name. I'm glad he's doing well." An awkward silence stretched between them. Daniel wanted to say more, to explain how much he'd changed, how sorry he still was, how that night had broken something in him that needed to be broken. But he didn't, because this wasn't about him. This was about her peace, her life, her right to move on without carrying his guilt. "I won't take any more of your time," Daniel said finally. "I just wanted you to know that what you did that night, who you were in that moment, it taught me something I should have learned long ago. That dignity doesn't come from power. It comes from character. And you have more character in your smallest gesture than I had in all my authority. So thank you. And I'm sorry. For everything." Naomi looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "I hope you remember that lesson every day you go to work. Because there are more people like me out there. Good people, scared people, people who deserve better than what you gave me that day. Be better for them." "I will," Daniel promised. "I am." Naomi gave him a small, sad smile, the kind that acknowledged pain but also forgiveness, then turned her cart and walked away. Daniel watched her go, watched her daughter skip alongside, watched the ease and joy in their movement. A family unbroken by his cruelty. A woman who'd risen above his attempts to diminish her. He drove home to Emily and Michael, holding that image in his mind. That's what power looked like. Not a badge. Not authority. Not the ability to hurt others without immediate consequence. Real power was grace under pressure. Professionalism in crisis. The choice to help even when you had every right to walk away. Daniel Hargreaves never became perfect. He made mistakes, got frustrated, had bad days. But he never again treated another person the way he'd treated Naomi Carter on that Houston Street corner. Because every time he was tempted, he remembered that hospital corridor. Remembered needing someone he'd wronged. Remember learning that the universe keeps score in ways you can't predict. 6 months later, Daniel received a letter at the ICE office. It was from the hospital, requesting his participation in a community dialogue program about law enforcement and immigrant communities. The program was designed to build bridges, create understanding, break down stereotypes. Daniel agreed immediately. At the first meeting, he walked into the community center and saw Naomi sitting in the circle of chairs, holding baby Jordan, there as a representative of the hospital's interpreter services. Their eyes met. She nodded slightly. He nodded back. And they both sat down to do the difficult work of healing, one conversation at a time. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the power of dignity over revenge, do me a favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me about a time someone showed you grace when they didn't have to. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. And subscribe to this channel, because we tell stories that matter. Stories about real people facing real consequences. Stories that remind us all that we're more connected than we think. Because at the end of the day, this story isn't just about Daniel and Naomi. It's about all of us. About how we treat people when we have power over them. About whether we choose cruelty or kindness when no one's watching. About what kind of world we're building with our daily choices, our casual cruelties, our moments of grace. Daniel Hargreaves learned his lesson the hard way. He humiliated a pregnant woman because he could, because his badge gave him permission, because he'd stopped seeing people as human beings worthy of respect. And the universe, with its strange sense of timing and justice, put him in a position where his life depended on that same woman's professionalism and mercy. She could have refused. She could have walked away. She could have let someone else interpret while his wife and child hung in the balance. No one would have blamed her. Revenge would have been understandable, even justified. But Naomi Carter didn't choose revenge. She chose professionalism. She chose to be who she was, a healer and helper, regardless of who needed her help. And in doing so, she didn't just save Emily Hargreaves' life. She saved Daniel's soul. Because the worst moment of Daniel's career wasn't when he faced internal affairs. It wasn't when he received his reprimand. It wasn't even when his son nearly died. It was when he looked into Naomi Carter's eyes in that hospital corridor and realized that dignity doesn't need permission. That real power has nothing to do with badges and authority. That you can strip someone of their rights, their peace, their comfort in their own neighborhood, but you can't strip them of their humanity unless they let you. And Naomi Carter had never let him. That's what Daniel learned. That's what changed him. Not the consequences, not the fear of losing his job, but the profound realization that the woman he'd tried to diminish was more powerful than he'd ever been, precisely because she didn't need to prove it. So before you go, ask yourself this question. If the tables were turned, if someone who'd wronged you needed your help, what would you choose? Revenge or grace? Cruelty or professionalism? The easy path or the right one? Your answer to that question says everything about who you really are when the badges come off and the titles fall away, and all that's left is your character. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in stories that challenge us to be better. Comment below with your thoughts. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because these conversations matter. These stories matter. You matter. And remember, the universe is always watching, always learning, always preparing lessons for those who need them. Treat people well. Not because you might need them someday, but because it's the right thing to do, whether anyone's watching or not. Thanks for watching. Until next time, choose grace. Choose dignity. Choose to be better than your worst moment. Because that's what Naomi Carter did. And that's what changed everything. Like, share, and comment on our videos. Tell us exactly where you are watching from. Houston, Texas, Alaska, United States, United Kingdom, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, or anywhere at all. We will really love what you think about this story.